Lessons from birds. How to be a good parent. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today about parental care in birds. In this presentation, I'm going to start by clarifying what makes a good parent from a biological perspective, and by explaining more broadly what is meant by parental care. For the majority of this presentation, I'm going to look at different types of parental care behaviours which we observe in birds. And I'll finish by explaining the importance of understanding parental care for conservation. So what makes a good parent? When we consider this from a human perspective, this can be a very difficult question to answer. As humans, we judge ourselves upon a whole host of complex social parameters. And there are many different things which we feel we need to provide to our children in order to be deemed good parents. But from a biological perspective, and for the study of parental care in birds, we look at measures from two timescales. The first, offspring condition and survival, tends to be a short-term measurement. For example, during a particular reproductive episode, how many of the offspring reach independence and survive until adulthood. The second measure, lifetime reproductive fitness, is a more absolute determination of reproductive success. Lifetime reproductive fitness considers the number of offspring that a particular individual is able to successfully raise throughout its lifetime, and how many of those offspring are in turn able themselves to go on to reproduce. In this way, absolute fitness can be thought of as how successful an adult is at passing on its genes to future generations. Now, as we'll see later, some behaviours which may increase an adult's lifetime reproductive fitness may be at odds with the needs of an individual chick or brood. It's also important to note that there's conflict or a trade-off which is inherent to the reproductive strategies employed by birds. A conflict between investing in the current brood, in brood number and brood quality, and between any potential future broods which an adult may have in subsequent reproductive cycles. There's a difference here between short-lived and longer-lived species, because for short-lived species, the probability of an adult surviving to the following breeding season may be relatively low. And therefore, we would expect adults of short-lived species to invest highly in the parental care of the current brood to increase the chances of offspring survival, thereby maximising their reproductive fitness. For more long-lived species, fecundity is not constrained to a single nesting cycle, and therefore we might expect them to invest less in parental care. So what is parental care? Parental care occurs whenever parents attempt to increase the survival and growth of their offspring, but this can often be at a cost to their own survival and reproduction. We can see parental care in many different types of animals. In mammals, as with birds, parental care consists of an extremely complex array of behaviours. However, you can also see examples of parental care in reptiles, amphibians, fish, and insects. Parental care is believed to have evolved several times because it's a reproductive strategy which favours the survival of offspring and therefore in turn the survival of the species. Now within birds we can see different types of behaviours. Parental care is involved in the production of gametes, nest construction, in incubation, so the warming of the eggs, and the feeding of the chicks, although this is going to depend upon the state of development of the nestlings once they hatch, which I'm going to talk about shortly. Some species will brood the recently hatched young to keep them warm. There is nest defense in order to protect offspring from potential predators. And some species will even provide post-fledging care, which is when the adults continue to provide food and other types of parental care once the young have left the nest and reached independence. So I wanted to show now this time-lapse video of an American robin's nest. And you can see now that the adult is incubating the eggs. In this species, it's only the female involved in incubation. The eggs have just hatched and brooding is going to occur. In this time lapse, I think you can really start to appreciate all the different activity which occurs around the nest. The adults constantly have to return to the nest to care for their young. These are altricial offspring. They were born without feathers. And you can see as the video progresses, their plumage emerges and the nestlings get bigger and bigger. As they age and get closer to the time of fledging, you can see that the nest is starting to get really quite squashed and there is very little space left in the nest cup. We can also see from the video that being a parent is very demanding. The adults are tied to the place where the eggs are. And with this species also, they have to return to the nest after hatching. So the adults are also tied to the nest and must deliver food for the nestlings. Now, the type and the level of parental care provided by the adults is going to depend upon the type of development and the stage of development which the chicks display upon hatching. And we can consider the precocial altricial spectrum. Let's start with the most developed, the chicks which are independent upon hatching, the precocials, such as the megapods, and many different species of ducks and poultry. When these eggs hatch for a precocial species, the chicks are born with their soft, furry down plumage, so they're able to keep warm. Their eyes are open, they're mobile, so they're able to move around, they can feed themselves, and therefore they really don't need their parents to provide them with very much parental care because they're able to survive on their own. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have altricial nestlings, which includes all the songbirds. And in contrast to the precocials, they're born without feathers, their eyes are closed, they're unable to move, they definitely cannot feed themselves. And if their parents don't provide them with extensive parental care, they simply will not survive. So parental care is going to increase along this precocial altricial spectrum. And in this way, we can think of birds responding to the needs of their offspring, which is something as humans, which we should obviously also do. So what can we look at? What types of parental care behaviors are evident in birds? Well, first of all, you have to provide your offspring with a home, and the majority of bird species will build a nest of some sort. Nest construction and the architecture of nests could itself comprise a whole series of individual talks. You have all these highly intricate designs. There are different types of nests, open nests, closed nests, different substrates and materials. Some nests may be made of mud, some with twigs, with spider silk, with saliva, from stone. Sometimes the eggs may be laid in sand or covered up with waterweed. But the function of the nests is to provide insulation to protect the eggs. The nest creates a microclimate that offers protection from the elements in the physical environment, but also a nest will provide protection from predators. Many are extremely well camouflaged. It may also offer some protection from parasites, and the nest may be the site of permanence for chicks as well as eggs. In addition, as well as being important for the development of the eggs, nests may also act in some species as a phenotypic extension. This is when the male builds the nest in order to attract a female, and therefore the nest is involved in an aspect of courtship. On this slide, you can see some examples of different nests, some really interesting nests from different species. So first we have the ruby-throated hummingbird, who makes her nest initially using her body and feet to shape the nest, and then collects spider silk, which she weaves within the nest, and then finally covers the nest with bits of lichen and moss from the outside. The Bayer weaver male constructs his nest in an attempt to attract a female, and it's a very complex nest. So this one is serving as a phenotypic extension, as previously mentioned. The little grebe produces a floating nest, which is made with bits of waterweed, and she covers the eggs with weed, when she's not there to incubate them. The great hornbill female showed amazing dedication to being a parent. She excavates a cavity in the tree and then uses her own feces and that of her mate to confine herself in order to protect the eggs from potential predators during incubation. So she traps herself within the hole and will remain for 40 days of incubation and for a further 5 weeks after the chicks have hatched. The female will even undergo a full molt during this time, which can render her temporarily flightless. Here in this photo, you can see the male delivering food to his mate, who is still temporarily trapped inside. So we learned so far from birds that it's important to provide your offspring with a home. For birds, incubation is an absolutely essential stage for successful embryonic development because the eggs are practically ectothermic. They depend upon the heat provided by the incubating parent or parents. In some species, incubation may be the sole responsibility of only one adult, whereas in others, both the male and the female will alternate and take it in turns to warm the eggs. Incubation exerts a substantial energetic demand upon the adults, especially if only one of them is incubating. This really is one of the most energetic stages of the nesting cycle, and incubation rhythm is known to affect embryonic development. Another aspect of parental care in birds, which is extremely important for many species, is food delivery at the nest. For those precocious species which are able to feed themselves, this is not an essential aspect of parental care and may be absent. For altricial and semi-altricial species, food delivery is the principal factor which affects growth and survival of the young. And it presents an optimization problem because any time that the parent is away, foraging food to bring back to the offspring at the nest is time when they are not finding food for themselves. So there needs to be a balance between maintaining the body condition of the adult and favoring offspring growth. Furthermore, in terms of the optimization problem, research tends to suggest that the amount of food provided is suboptimal from the perspective of the nestlings. If the nestlings were to receive the optimal amount of food, the parent would provide them with slightly more than they would be able to give. Therefore, it's a compromise. The ability of the parents to deliver food to the nest is also affected by various factors, such as parental fitness, age, weight, parasitic load, and the presence or absence of disease. Therefore, the ability of the adult birds to care for their offspring is dependent upon many different factors, including their own physical condition. Just as with human babies, baby chicks can be extremely demanding. And we can see here these altricial nestlings are begging vigorously for food. They're having a little break for a moment, but they're going to start again shortly. So there are 3 chicks, and you can see in the video that they open their mouths and they start to vocalize. It doesn't have any sound here, but they open their mouths and they're begging and vocalizing to stimulate their parents to return to the nest and provide them with food. Another important aspect of parental care behavior in birds is protection against predators. Predation is a key factor which affects life history evolution and can constrain parental nest activity. Because if parents visit the nest too frequently, this can be a signal and can give away the position of the nest to any potential predators who are watching. So again, this is the problem of optimization because the adults need to visit the nest frequently enough or sufficiently enough to raise their nestlings and meet the demands of their growing offspring, but not to go too frequently and increase the chance of the nest being detected and predation occurring. Nest defense behavior can also be risky for the birds. In some cases, it can lead to injury or death. Nest defense behavior is highly varied and can include swoops, attack flights, hissing, and some species will even fake injury as a distraction tactic to lead away potential predators from the place where the nest or the offspring are located. And in a moment, I'm going to show you an interesting example of this faking behavior. So it's important there's an assessment between the perceived risk of predation and the potential benefits. In altricial species, nest defense behavior will typically increase with nesting development. As the chicks get closer to fledging age, their probability of survival increases, and therefore their value to the adults in terms of potential fitness benefits is higher than when they were newly born or when they were only eggs. Therefore, altricial species are more likely to exhibit nest defense behavior as the chicks get older. So here, this is a really cool example of a killdeer faking injury. So this is a distraction tactic to lead away a potential predator from the nesting site and to reduce the chance of the brood being lost to predation. So the bird will pretend that the wings are injured, but later on, the bird will escape and will be able to fly normally. So we've seen so far how it's important to incubate the eggs and for many species to provide food and protect them from potential predators. Some species will even go so far as to provide post-fledging care. This is parental care which is given once the offspring are nutritionally independent and are no longer tied to the nest. The juveniles of these species are technically able to survive on their own. However, longer post-fledging care is associated with increased offspring survival and condition. Again, there's a trade-off though between current and future broods, because whilst ever the adults are still raising previous nestlings or juveniles, they're not investing in any future offspring. This is a really important aspect of the reproductive behavior of the Andean condor, and something that needs to be taken into account for the conservation of this iconic species, because the young of the condor, typically a sole chick, will remain with its parents for up to a year after leaving the nest, and the male and the female will continue to feed their juvenile. This represents a considerable amount of time which the parents spend caring for their chick, and it's important for the future survival probability of this individual offspring. However, it helps to explain the low fecundity of the condor and is a reason why it can take such a long time to recover from population losses. Now, so far, many of the parental care behaviors which we have seen are things that as humans we also do. We need to provide a safe home for our offspring, give them enough food, warmth, and protect them from danger. But remember, there's a difference between what we consider from our human perspective as being a good parent and, biologically speaking, what we would consider as a good parent and what can lead to an increase in lifetime reproductive fitness. Some birds employ reproductive strategies that benefit their overall lifetime fitness, and therefore, biologically speaking, we consider these species good parents, even though they don't comply with our human perspective and sense of morality. For brood parasites, such as cuckoos, being a good parent means laying your eggs in someone else's nest. This is a great strategy for the biological parent because you don't need to provide any parental care. Someone else is going to invest their time and energy rearing your nestling. Some species of birds will also display siblicide behavior. This is when the older nestling or the older chicks kill the younger one, and it is more common when food is scarce. Siblicide behavior occurs in species such as the cattle egret. Now, the reason I have included it in this presentation is because the adults do not intervene. They observe that the behavior is occurring, but they don't intervene because in terms of fitness, this can be a beneficial strategy. If they have 3 offspring and there is only enough food for 2, continuing to try to raise all 3 could lead to the loss of the whole brood, whereas allowing one to be sacrificed means that the rest are more likely to survive. If 2 of them are older, and bigger, they will also outcompete the younger. So in birds, being a good parent doesn't necessarily mean caring for every single one of your offspring. Finally, I wanted to briefly mention nest abandonment. This is most common before eggs are actually laid. However, it can occur at later stages if food is scarce, or if the nest is disturbed, or if the perceived risk of predation increases. Adults will generally not risk their own body condition or integrity. Therefore, if the environment is not favorable, the adults will abandon their nest, including a nest with eggs or chicks. They will not jeopardize their own survival. And from working with nests, I have to say that it's very sad to find a nest with chicks which has been abandoned for some reason by its parents. In terms of parental care for conservation, we should remember that in birds, parental care is linked to reproductive success and is key to avian reproductive strategies. Therefore, in terms of the maintenance of a species or a population over time, it is important to understand the parental care behaviours that are involved. The study of parental care can help us to learn about key life history traits, and we can use this to understand about the reproductive biology of threatened species. Earlier, I mentioned the example of the Andean condor. Understanding the investment in parental care made by the adults helps us to understand why the fecundity of the condor is so low compared to other species, even within the same bird family. Also, in terms of protecting threatened species, nesting sites need to be protected to ensure that human disturbance does not alter the natural behaviour and parental care provided by adults. And we need to make sure that we don't disturb these birds and lead to them inadvertently abandoning their nests. So in conclusion, parental care in birds consists of an extremely complex array of different behaviours. However, the adults respond to the needs of their young, depending upon how developed they are and the environmental conditions that exist at that particular time. Being a parent is not easy. It will cost you. Whether you're a bird or a human, parental care is extremely costly. You have to dedicate time and energy to this behavior. However, there are potential lifetime fitness benefits. If you'd like to learn more about parental care in birds, I highly recommend these two books. They both have the same title, but have different authors. They don't exclusively focus on birds. However, a lot of the parental care work that has been done, a lot of research, and a lot of the models have been developed using birds as their model species, because it's very easy to study the behavior of birds which occurs around the nest. So I highly recommend looking up these two books if you'd like to learn more about parental care in birds. I'd like to thank the organisers of the Bird Fair for the invitation to come to give you this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to email myself or to contact the Ornithology Lab at Universidad del Valle. Thank you.